Welcome to CitizenGO Interviews, where we address the battles most are too afraid to confront. Today, we're talking about the medical world, where truth-telling can cost you everything. Dr. Eithan Haim is a surgeon from Texas who found himself at the center of one of the most explosive cultural and ethical battles of our time. When he saw what was happening behind closed doors in one of America's leading children's hospitals, he made a decision to speak out. What followed was a firestorm of retaliation from the federal government, a media blackout, and powerful medical industry determined to silence him. Now, Dr. Haim joins CitizenGO to share his story, what he saw, why he spoke out, and what every parent and citizen must know about the growing threat of so-called gender-affirming care. Dr. Haim, thank you for your courage and for joining CitizenGO in defense of life, family, and freedom. Let's start with your story. What did you witness at Texas Children's Hospital when you felt compelled to speak out?
Yeah, and thank you for having me on. My name is Eithan Haim. I'm a general surgeon, and I'm glad I was able to make it on. I just finished doing a couple operations, so I'm a general surgeon, and when I was doing my training between 2018 and 2023, I was at Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, which is one of the best surgical training programs in the country. And part of the program is that I was rotating at different hospitals in the medical center. So, one of those includes Texas Children's Hospital, which is the largest children's hospital in the world by far, by like 300 beds, and also one of the most prestigious in the country. And we spent a huge amount of time training there. So because I started my training in 2018, I was able to see this huge transformation in the world of medicine before and after COVID. And even though it's peripherally related to this story, I believe that the transgender issue was kind of, found its root in the COVID madness. So, 2020 comes around, COVID just takes over the whole medical profession, where ideology becomes more important. And from that, the transgender issue really proliferated across the country. And that's when I became more familiar with it, 2021, 2022. And I had no idea that Texas Children's had a transgender program. It was only in mid-2022 that I found out. And what I realized is that a few months before, in March of that year, in 2022, the hospital had released a public statement that they were going to shut down the program because of potential criminal ramifications. And that came from the Attorney General of Texas releasing a statement a couple of weeks earlier saying that these interventions could be investigated as child abuse. So it kind of makes their statement in March of 2022 make sense, right? They're saying they're shutting down this program. They want to take off the heat. But because I worked at Texas Children's Hospital, I knew that that was a complete lie. And I knew that because I worked there. I did surgery there. And the people who were doing these surgeries were implanting puberty blocking devices in 11-year-old children, right, who believed they were transgender, that they were still doing these procedures, that they not only continued these interventions, but they expanded their clinic into a multidisciplinary clinic, right, including multiple specialties, and it became a hospital-wide priority.
My goodness, so that was something that they had said they're not doing it anymore because the laws had been written to prevent it, and then they continued openly doing this. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah, well, it's I believe that this has always been illegal because this is medical negligence and assault in my perspective, but that's kind of a separate issue. What the hospital was responding to was not a law yet, but actually the Attorney General saying that these interventions were child abuse, which they are. So what the hospital was doing is they were just blatantly lying to the state, to their patients, and to their community, right? The people who they're supposed to take care of. And when I decided to blow the whistle, that was in May of 2023, kind of a long time after, because it took me 5 months to get a hold of a journalist who was willing to tell the story. And that was Christopher Rufo. And the story comes out on May 16th, 2023. right? And I'm the anonymous whistleblower who exposes the fact that the hospital is lying about continuing these interventions. So the hospital blows up. No one knows who I am because I'm anonymous. But it was a day later, 24 hours later, that the Texas Senate passes SB 14, which is a bill to ban these interventions by law. So within 24 hours of our story coming out, what we exposed was codified as illegal in the state of Texas.
Okay, so then when did the Biden Department of Justice get involved with this situation?
Yeah, so they acted very, very quickly. People always think that, the federal government is incompetent and they move slowly, but when they want to target their political enemies, they move very fast. Because 4 weeks later, on the day of my graduation from surgical training, one of the most important days of my life, right? I'm about to meet with my family, right? I'm, it's like the culmination of an entire lifetime of hard work. They sent armed agents to my home, my apartment, a couple of hours before. And, thankfully, I kind of freaked out. I invited them into my apartment. They sit down and they were getting ready for an interview. But thank God, my wife is a federal prosecutor, right? With DOJ. She's actually a federal prosecutor. And she comes out and she's like, oh, bad idea. You should not speak to these people without an attorney. So I go back out and I tell them that, but they hand me a target letter informing me I'm a potential target of a criminal investigation. And so that day, I knew that like my entire life was going to be changed forever. Mm-hmm. And granted, nothing that we did as part of our whistleblowing, I did, violated any law. There was no patient information released. There was no identifiable information released. The only patient information that was released was from the Department of Justice when they indicted me a year later.
Oh my goodness. Well, so this sounds very complex, and I think I'd like to come back to the whole gender affirming care. So I think that many Americans are still unaware that the gender affirming care you're talking about includes irreversible procedures that they were doing on children, even coming back to that ethical place. So you alluded to what those might have been. So what is it that was actually going on? Was it medications? Was it surgeries? What exactly were the interventions that were taking place at Texas Children's?
Do you mind if I blow my nose really quick?
Of course.
Yeah. Yeah, I was super sick last week, but
we had to stop one time when I was interviewing Alveda King because her dog would not shut up, and she starts yelling at everybody in the house, "Make the dog shut up!"
Yeah.
You're gonna erase that, aren't you? You're gonna. It's like,
yeah.
I really want to leave it in there, but I'll take care of it.
Yeah. It's kind of like it's personal, but so the precise interventions that they were doing at Texas Children's, so they were doing they had like a primary care to endocrinology to surgery pipeline, and what that means specifically is they would advocate for the no barrier social affirmation immediately. Any child who believes that they are gender non-conforming, right? They would advocate for their social transition, which is a major intervention in itself. Then they would do puberty blockers for Tanner stage 2. Tanner stage 2 is the period of time before the onset of puberty. And what that means when you insert puberty blockers into a child before the onset of puberty is that you are going to halt the entire progression of that child through puberty into adulthood. So like all the secondary sexual characteristics are going to be stunted. Their bone growth is going to be stunted. Their brain development is going to be stunted. Their voice is going to be irreversibly changed. Their emotion, like their how they respond emotionally, they often go into a state of menopause. And then that is started. The youngest age I saw at Texas Children's was 11 years old. And then they go on to hormones starting around 13, 14 years old. And it's important for people to know that, and then the surgeries, as far as I saw, they were sending out to other hospitals in other states or in other places in Texas. But I didn't see any of like the mastectomies being done at Texas Children's. But it's important for people to know that the hormone interventions, puberty blockers, estrogen, testosterone, is just as radical as any of the surgeries, because there's no surgery in the world that can stunt your bone development, can stunt your pubertal development or your brain development like these medications. These are the most radical medications that are like a million microsurgeries that occur every single day from the inside out.
Well, what is driving this push, do you think? You've been on the inside, this push for child gender transitions. Is it the profit? Is it just ideology? Is it fear because parents don't know what to do and doctors are giving them an answer? What do you think it is? It's really driving this.
So I think there's two factions involved. So, the political left, the radical communist left, had succeeded in their march through our society's institutions over the past couple of decades. So on one side, one of the factions are radical left-wing ideologues who control, for example, Texas Children's Hospital, the Texas Medical Center. You have people in positions of power who can have a significant impact on that institution's policy. So part of that policy, as it manifested in reality, was them lying about this program, right? Like that's a radical thing to do, to be in charge of a children's hospital and then lie about continuing a program that's manipulating, mutilating, and sterilizing healthy young children. That's a crazy thing for like a bologna shop to do if they were like selling like bacon in a Jewish neighborhood, right? If like you had like a deli who was lying about selling bacon in a Jewish neighborhood, that'd be a big deal enough, right? But this is a children's hospital, right? So you have left-wing ideologues who control the institutions. But then remember, this is Texas. A lot of the people who run these hospitals in the Texas Medical Center, which is the biggest medical center in the world, are old money Texas Republicans, right? These are the squishy Republicans who are generally cowards, who are also generally in love with money, and that's like their idol. So they will worship money, material success, and power more so than like whatever lip service they pay to like their religion. So you have this kind of perfect union between radical left-wing ideologues and squishy conservative, pseudo-conservative, old money Texas Republicans who want to continue making a lot of money so they concede to the radical left-wing ideologues.
So what motivates an individual doctor? I mean, I'm just very curious about that. Why would an individual doctor, knowing what's going to happen to this child?
Yeah, I think, of course, it's hard to say, to crawl into the mind of these doctors. I think that many of them are part of the first faction. These are radical left-wing ideologues who do not believe there is any power outside of themselves. Like there is no objective moral order or objective physical law, like biological law that they have to abide by. And that's really important because a doctor's role is to abide by like biological reality. We have to observe laws, physiological laws. We have to identify them. We have to be able to institute interventions that will work within those laws to bring people back to their naturally occurring physiology. These people believe that they can exceed those laws. They can write their own laws, because what they're proposing is that a male can become a female, vice versa, or whatever in between, like these made-up genders that have no definition, right? I mean, that in itself is the creation of new biological law. But, right, we know that this is fake. This is completely phony, like witchcraft, right? So that's what I believe is motivating these people. There are some doctors, which I believe are in the minority, who are motivated, are pressured into it, and don't really have any meaningful convictions. So they kind of let themselves get followed along with whatever like social, fad is going along.
So do you feel like that there are others that know the truth, but maybe are too afraid to speak?
Oh, I would say the vast majority of everyone. I mean, yeah, of course, it's like hundreds, if not over 1,000 people at Texas Children's knew that this was going on and knew how wrong this was, right? Like, there's nothing a doctor should do behind closed doors that they should not be willing to defend publicly. Once this story came out in May of 2023, not a single doctor, not a single person from the hospital was willing to defend this, right? And like, there's not a single thing I've ever done, right, in my entire surgical practice that I would not be willing to defend to the public at large, to a court of law, or my patients and their families, which is the last of which is the single most important thing. Because if you cannot defend it to them, then you can't defend it to the public. And what these people were not able to do is any of that.
So you spoke about the law and the court of law. So the Biden administration targeted you, and I believe probably for the ideological reasons. Donald Trump's DOJ dropped those charges. But what does that tell us or tell you about the political motivations behind this issue and the future that we're headed toward, depending on who holds power?
Yeah, I think that so this was political from the very get-go, right? And just to kind of highlight a couple of points from the legal case, right? They indicted me in June of 2024, a year after they first sent agents to my home. And it was the first time in American history that they were charging someone with a HIPAA-based crime, but instead of the patients being the victims, it was multi-billion-dollar hospital systems who were now the victims. So the DOJ was trying to use the privacy accorded to patients in healthcare settings. They were trying to move that privacy protection to major hospital systems, which of course is a recipe for corruption, right? And it's radical enough to try to say that hospitals have a right to privacy, to lie to the public, right? But especially when the lead prosecutor has major, when her entire family has major business interests in these multi-billion-dollar hospital systems, which is the exact case in my situation. Because right after we exposed the lead prosecutor having, that her immediate family members were major donors to TCH, her uncle was a board member of TCH previously. Her brother was a CEO of the largest private label coffee company in the country, who had business with Baylor College of Medicine hospital systems. Like that's absurdly corrupt. And she's the one who's reinterpreting HIPAA to make it not about patients, but about the hospital systems who her family has the most to benefit from if they are protected by corrupt DOJ lawfare, right? So like that, I mean, there's like probably 10 or 15 other layers to the corruption in this case, probably beyond the scope of this conversation. But this is the fact that Trump got elected was a major turning point, because justice can finally be restored to the system, right? And because it was 4 days after he was inaugurated that this case was dismissed. Not to say that it was an easy feat, because my case was dismissed on January 24th. The day before, 2 days before, on that Wednesday, I had violated the Judge Hittner's, who was the judge overseeing my case, his corrupt gag order, right? It was a de facto gag order. He was too much of a coward to sign the order, because he would know he would become the laughing stock of like the legal world for signing a gag order against someone like me who's never been recognized publicly, Okay. So he just threatened to send me to jail, right? And said I can't criticize the government, or else I'll send you to jail, right? And a bunch of other threats. So, he silenced me for about a month and a half, but then at some point I said, this is too much. So I spoke out a couple of days before the January 24th. And that evening, I was told that I was going to go to jail, that because I spoke out, I was going to go to jail. He was going to sign the arrest warrant the next day. And unless I signed an agreement with the government to make the case go away, that the judge was going to send me to jail. So he was essentially extorting me, right? He was saying, I'm going to send you to jail. for doing something which I have no authority to send you to jail for. But you have to sign an agreement with the government in order to make this all go away and to get this out of my hair. So, I signed this agreement, that I would have never signed because it was under duress. I would have violated it a couple of days later, because it was under duress. A contract has no validity if it's under duress. And that's when Josh Hawley got involved and a bunch of other people got involved once they got word that that I was like a couple hours away from going to jail. So it was that Friday morning that the DOJ, the transition team in DC, had issued a advising advice to the Southern District of Texas to dismiss this case with prejudice immediately. So like a day after the judge was trying to send me to jail, he has to sign this dismissal with prejudice. So it was like a big middle finger to this corrupt judge, and then finally I was free.
I love that part of your story because it is like, a Bible story where you're going before the great King Nebuchadnezzar and all of the things. I love that part of the story because it, you had a victory there. But, we still have doctors who are willing and people who are pushing for these puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones and surgeries on minors. They're pushing for these things. And, you got the corruption in the court system that you were attacked with. And now we've got this medical establishment ignoring science. What do you think the answers are when, because I know there are really incredible parents who are facing these decisions with their children and they're trying to figure out what's the best way to go. But what do we do? How do we answer a doctor or a psychiatrist or a psychologist or someone in the medical field who's ignoring the science?
Yeah, I would say that they're ignoring this. So say, for example, right, I have a clinic right outside, and say I started seeing patients for appendectomies, right? And I say, these are patients who are depressed, but they're coming into me because they're depressed. I'm saying, hey, if I take out your appendix, it will cure your depression, right? And I come up with a bunch of phony studies to say, like, I take out your appendix, I'll cure your depression. And I convince a bunch of people of that. And I do surgery on a bunch of people. What would happen in my case is I would go to prison, right? Mm-hmm. Because that's like medical assault. You're deceiving people as to what the nature of their problem is. Even if I got informed consent, if I explained all the risks of those surgeries, it wouldn't be legitimate because I was fundamentally misinformed about the nature of the problem, depression, which I was treating, right? So the answer to this is, I believe, very simple. These doctors are violating the law. They are assaulting patients, right? They should be prosecuted as such. And these are not like, radical, like hardened criminal cartel members, right? Like all you have to do is prosecute a couple of them, send a couple of them to prison, right? And for like legitimate crimes, right? Not like the fake crimes like they were coming after me for, but these people are actually harming children, right? They're lying to the families about it, and they're causing irreversible damage. So what you do, DOJ throws a couple of them in prison, prosecutes them for legitimate crimes. They undergo a fair trial, right? And then, a jury of their peers can determine whatever verdict is appropriate. And then the other people fall in line, because these people are not, once they see the threat of prison, most of them will stop because, these people are radicals, but most of them are cowards too, for the most part. Some of them, I believe, would be willing to go to jail because some of them are that crazy.
Yes. Well, and we also have, it seems like, not just an aggressive medical industry, but an educational system pushing transition. And then now you've got the corrupt judges and the court system. So it feels just talking to you, it feels very overwhelming to say, will it ever be righted? And I feel like your case and what you have done is that step that the system needed. Do you feel like that is one of the primary things that had to happen?
Yeah, and see, that's the thing. Like, you're right. It is overwhelming. And for people who hear the story, it's like, oh man, like you have these judges, you have the prosecutors, you have the universities, you have the hospitals, you have the nursing associations, the doctor associations, psychology, psychiatry, endocrinology, everyone. But the thing is, even me, a random person who's completely broke, who had no connections, I was able to take on the most powerful federal leviathan, the most powerful propaganda network in human history. And I was not only able to win, but to kick their butts, right? And this was this was not just like me winning by like the hair on my chin. This was us like laying down the hammer on these losers, right? And so if I can do it as someone who had no connections, right, and no money, everything was simply by crowdfunding and donations. If I was able to do it, then it goes to show the power of the individual to overcome the corruption of these institutions. Because when you have the individual who is on the side of the truth and righteousness, right, then they can overcome anything, no matter what the odds, as long as they continue to believe in what's right. And as long as they're willing to sacrifice something meaningful. Because in my fight against these people, I was willing to go to jail. I was willing to die for it. And this was not just me, it was my family, right? And we had made that determination from the very get-go that we were willing to sacrifice everything for this. And it's only when you're willing to sacrifice everything that you're able to succeed in overcoming the greatest of odds.
That's incredible. You've mentioned that you were broke. I think maybe you're broker now even.
Oh, yeah. Like close to seven figures broke,
And so, you mentioned that we have this path that's set before us. And so your vision for restoring integrity in the medical field and protecting children, holding the industry accountable, keeping the corruption out of our judicial system that would actually protect doctors that are trying to tell the truth. Your answer is?
So very granular, right? Criminal prosecutions of the doctors, criminal prosecutions of the prosecutors, criminal prosecution of the FBI agents, impeachment of the judges.
That's a lot to ask, isn't it?
Not that much. I mean, I mean, see, the thing is, it's just, if this was happening, say it was a conservative prosecutor, conservative judge who did something like this, who had crafted an indictment around false testimony, which was in my case, right? It was based on false testimony that they should have known was false. Those prosecutors would be prosecuted for violation of my civil rights. I mean, this is like as clear a case as possible, but there is the Overton window, right? If the left does it, it's like totally cool. It's like no problem. But if the right does it, it's like, oh, we have to, do something about that.
Mm-hmm.
But if it happens on the right, yeah, we should do something about it. But also, if it happens on the left, we should also do something about it. We just have to bring the Overton window back from over here to like where it should be, and just treat people equal. That's it, Well,
and I feel like that you took the step that had to be bravely taken. And I appreciate your courage so much for bringing some sanity to the whole conversation. Your case wraps up so many things: the medical side, the corruption, the judicial side, the government side with the DOJ. And I appreciate you and your wife and your family for being willing to step out and do this. And you are true heroes. And your faith and your courage, I hope and I know that people will find the same courage that you have exemplified. And I appreciate everything you've done. And thank you.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I mean, people already have. I mean, there's other whistleblowers who are coming out, other TCH whistleblowers. Yeah. I mean, like ever since our story came out, we've built a whole network of whistleblowers who have cases going on behind the scenes.
Wow, I would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
That's incredible. Well, Eithan Haim, thank you so much for joining us, and the CitizenGO family. Thank you for your courage, for standing up, for doing what was right in the face of all adversity. Thank you for being with us today.
All right. Thank you very much.